Today I will speak more about the future, the current development of this observational technique. So, and what are the short-term, long-term considerations that we have in mind. So yesterday we stopped around this 4 interferometer, and we are now looking. We have a good experience now about the science program that have been developed on the VLTI, on the CHAR array. The CHAR array with the very long baseline is very well adapted to stellar astrophysics. Also because of the sensitivity limit, because of the 1 meter telescope that are the 6 1-meter telescope of the CHAR array. So that's clearly limit the sensitivity of the array. But the very long baseline are very interesting to resolve main sequence star, for example. For the VLTI, of course, we have this 4 8-meter telescope, and the sensitivity is very good. So and now with the installation of the gravity instrument and the Matisse instrument, as I explained you yesterday, we have a very wide coverage of spectral wavelengths. So that's very interesting. There is a new, for example, the L band at 3.5 microns, a new band. And there is a lot of things to learn from this new spectral window that we have with the interferometer. So the sensitivity is very good with the 4 8-meter telescope, and the fact that the 4 2-meter class telescope could be reconfigured. So you can change the position of the small telescope on the platform. That's very interesting for imaging, because on the CHAR array the telescopes are fixed, so you cannot change the baseline, you cannot change the sampling of the UV plane of the spatial frequency of the object. Here with the 4-meter, the 4 2-meter class telescope, as we have seen yesterday during the practical session, you can have very close, very compact configuration. That's interesting for large extended objects. That's very interesting. And you can also have a quite diluted array with 200-meter telescope. That is very good. And the fact that you can change the configuration, you can observe the same object with different configuration and combine all this information. That's very, very interesting for imaging, because you improve the quantity of data that you will get with your interferometer, which is not the case with the CHAR array, because the telescopes are fixed, and the only possibility you have here is to wait for the rotation of the Earth during the night, and then the projected baseline is changing. This is, for example, the east-west baseline here, and when the star is coming from the east and going to the west, of course, the star sees a baseline that is projected, that is changing. So that's interesting, but this is long and not very efficient, of course. So from this first, this is not the first. This is already the second generation of interferometer, and this is really facilities that are open widely. This is not as in the first generation instrument that were used by a small team. Now this is there is a lot of open time on this interferometer. A large community is starting to use these facilities, and there is a lot of tools to help the newcomers in this observing technique to use the interferometer. So with this in mind, what are the main science drivers for the future of interferometry? That's clear that but the exoplanet characterization is something that is very important, of course, and you will find this science driver in almost every new project. In fact, that's a general characteristic. People are looking for not only exoplanet detection, but characterization. That's something that is very interesting, because there has been a paper by Sylvestre Lacour just at the beginning of the year, using the gravity instrument. It has been possible to the gravity instrument, as I explained you yesterday, is looking at 2 stars at the same time with a small angle, in fact. And 1 star is used for stabilizing the interferometer, and the other field, the other star, could be put on a very faint star. And what he has done here, he has put the second fiber of the gravity instrument on the exact location where the planet is expected, because this is a well-known planet, well-known system, so we know we have a very good orbital solution for the orbital motion of the planet, and by putting the second field of gravity exactly at the position, can integrate for a long time. And he has been able to reach a very nice K-band spectrum of this planet. And this kind of, that's very original and very interesting. And in the future, with the development of the gravity instrument on the VLTI, with the improvement of the sensitivity, this will be a very interesting thing. And the point is that when you have the very high angular resolution of an interferometer, allow you to very well separate the star and the planet. So you are less, there is less light from the star in the field of the planet because of the very high angular resolution. If you have your interferometer that is working well, all the light of the star is going in a very nice central image, and you have a central image for the planet at the same time. So doing that is very interesting. Detailed imaging of surface of star, I already speak to that yesterday, and that's very important because there is a lot of space mission related to exoplanet studies, but the fact is that when we observe exoplanet, most of the time, if you do not have sufficient information on the host star, you are losing some of the information on the planet. For example, if you do not have an information of the inclination of the system and you observe your planet by radial velocity, you have an uncertainty. You know the mass multiplied by the sinus I of the sinus of the inclination of the system. You don't know the mass of the planet. You have an upper limit. So that's knowing better the star is very important. For example, also for the mission like the Kepler mission, the TESS mission, or the future Plateau mission from the ESA, which is a measurement of photometric transit. So transit of exoplanet in front of the star. When the planet is going in front of the star, you see a change of intensity of light. And if you can measure the change of intensity of light through this transit of the exoplanet, you have an information on the relative size of the planet versus the star. You have the radius of the planet over the radius of the star. You can deduce the density of the planet, which is something that is really interesting. But of course, if your star is like this, with a lot of activity or spots, you have some bias in the measurement of the planet. So having a very interesting characterization of the surface of the star when you are looking to planets around the star is very important. So that will be a critical development in the future. With the improvement of the sensitivity also, and that's a very important research that has been made for a long time in optical interferometry, is to improve the sensitivity because even if you make an image of star, when you it's something I tell you in the first lecture, when you want to have images of such quality images, you need to have enough photon per element of resolution on the surface of the disk. So you need sensitivity even if you observe bright stars. But with the sensitivity, you have also the possibility to do extragalactic astrophysics with a very new view on this object. And this is again two results obtained this last year by the gravity team. The first one is the evidence of the rotation of the broadline region in this famous quasar with this differential visibility measurement and the model of the rotation of the broadline region. That's very important. This is the first time that has been seen. And this is artist illustration of the very central region of a black hole with this the very inner region with the free Schwarzschild radius around the black hole. So imaging this kind of thing, understanding what is causing this flare of light around the event horizon of the black hole is something that is really important. And doing that not only on the black hole that is in the center of our galaxy, but doing that on other galaxies is really important. So around all these things, what we need is to continue to improve the sensitivity of the interferometer, to improve the angular resolution, the imaging performance, and also it's important to continue to extend the wavelength domain, especially for these topics here, imaging the surface of star to support, to help spectroscopic or photometric mission that usually are working in the visible. It's really important that the imaging of the star is done in the visible also. So if we so that's, of course, there is a lot of other idea around the possible science area for future interferometry, but this is, I think, really the main science goal that are driving the future development of this observing technique. So, in short, there will be, I will continue my presentation around three different steps. So the short term of the development of optical interferometry, mid-term, and you will see that there is already the idea of developing a worldwide interferometric infrastructure, really dedicated for kilometric baseline. The first step is we have a lot to do with the current interferometer, the VLTI and the CHAR array, but we also can, this is a limited baseline to 300 meters, and we need to go to kilometric baseline to resolve the center part of the disk forming region, the planet forming region in the disk. So that's the goal of this mission, future mission, which is called Planet Formation Manager. This is more about improving the current infrastructure to go to the maximum of the possibility offered by the interferometer. And I will also speak a little bit at the end about the long-term future. So concerning the short term for the VLTI, first of all, there is a project that is currently under preparation, is to use the gravity instrument working in the K-band as a fringe tracker for the Matisse in the LMN band. That's interesting because then you can use Matisse as gravity is working. It means that Matisse will be able to make long integration. So that will really boost the sensitivity of this instrument, and that will really open new science domain for this instrument. So that's that's not very complicated. In fact, that's an upgrade of the infrastructure that is proposed, and that will be probably in operation by beginning of next year. The main development that is considered today is taking benefit of the great successes of the gravity instrument and to push as much as possible what this instrument is able to do. So the goal, there is a lot of goals that are mainly the extrapolation of what gravity is already doing. So exoplanet spectra, the black hole masses of active galactic activity, but across cosmic time, so it means a different redshift. That would be very interesting. And going to galactic target as faint at 22 magnitude is also important for different programs in stellar astrophysics, especially for very old stars that are very interesting for the having a global view on the evolution of the galaxy. So for that, there will be modification of the instrument to improve the sensitivity, to push for the off-axis fringe tracking that permits to go for long integration on object. And to push the sensitivity, the idea is to push laser guide star for the adaptive optics of the 8-meter telescope. There is already one installed on one telescope, but the idea is to put the laser guide star on the 4 8-meter telescope. That will also benefit for many other instruments on the VLT, but that's really critical for the sensitivity of the Gravity Plus instrument. There's been a workshop in June this year. You have a link here. And you can see, you may find here on this website, there is a nice collection of propositions by the community for new ideas for instrumentation for the VLTI, not only the VLTI but also the VLT. That's interesting because with the decommissioning of the third generation instrument of the VLTI, there are some empty place in the beam combining lab of the VLT, and there is a visitor focus that is open, and groups can bring instruments either for their own use with some limited access, or some of the instruments, and that was the case of the Pioneer instrument that we have seen this last day. The Pioneer instrument was at the beginning a visitor instrument, and it has become, in fact, a community instrument because it was really working very well. So the visitor focus is open. There is many ideas, and we have in the group in Nice also the idea of pushing for visible instrument for the VLTI, especially because the fact that, as I will explain you later, on the char array we are really focused on the stellar fundamental parameters, so measuring radii of star, effective temperature. Developing a visible instrument for the VLTI would be very interesting for imaging stellar surfaces. So on the char array, there is of course the conclusion of the adaptive optic program, so installation of adaptive optic to boost the sensitivity on the 6 1-meter telescope. This is under progress. There is also some upgrade of the instruments. They have got some funding to install new infrared detector, which are very much better than the previous one with very low noise. And I will explain you a little bit after that. We have started the development of a new visible instrument with a H-band fringe tracker that we will install in the coming 2 years on the char array. There is also for the char group a reflection about the idea of putting additional telescope on the mountain. So the beam combining lab is able to accept up to 8 telescopes. There is 6 at that time, so 2 additional telescopes will be combined to the 6 already existing. There is also the possibility of having maybe 12 or 16 telescopes on the mountain and just combining 8 at one dedicated time, and then you combine the other later on the night. You're just using the fact that you can rapidly switch from one telescope to another. So this is not very efficient, but that's a way to improve the quality of the image reconstruction. Adding new telescope will also open the possibility of going to 600 or 800 meter baseline, which is interesting. And they're also speaking about 2-meter class telescope. And that's something that is really important. When you go to large baseline, very long baseline, you start to resolve very fine detail on the surface of star. And if you go to very fine detail, you need sensitivity. So if you go to 800 meter baseline with a small telescope, you will have very few objects, in fact, that will be observable with your interferometer. So going to long baseline, push to go to larger telescope. So now I will focus more the rest of my talk on this instrument, because this is the one I'm preparing with my group in Nice. So it's an instrument called SPICA, which means stellar parameter and images with a co-phased array. And the main science driver for this are coming from 2 recent work. One that has been done by a group in the US and also a group in Nice. It's the fact that it's what I explained just before. It's the fact that using the interferometer for measuring an exoplanet or star give you very interesting constraint on the planet parameter. So here we have a transiting exoplanet, quite well known by a photometric measurement. And with the measurement of the visibility function, the group here have been able to make very nice constraint on the parameter of the star and of the planet, and especially by having the combination of this measurement, this interferometric measurement, with stellar model evolution, you have the possibility to improve the correlation between your parameter, and not only give an error bar on the mass or an error bar on the radius, but you have a connection between the parameter radius and mass, and that has an impact on the constraint on the parameter of the planet. So this is the diagram for the planet, mass versus radius versus mass, and the fact that you have a probability density of solution for these things give you interesting. That's a paper by Ricci et al. In 2016. Plus there is a new one in 2018. Having that, then you can distinguish the different model of the planet, the different. You can have constraint on the density of the planet, knowing if it's a rocky planet or if it has a central core, things like that. So developing this kind of program is very important. So that has been done on a very few number of stars for the moment, but in the future it will be very interesting to do that on hundreds of stars, for example. The second example, it's a paper published beginning of the year in Nature by Greg Kretinsky. The title is a 1% distance determination to the Large Magellan Cloud. That's part of the Araucaria project that is going on for distance determination in the universe. So it's part of work that the community, the astronomical community, is doing for improving the knowledge of the Hubble constant. And that's not only the extragalactic and cosmological mission that can bring things. Here, with the with the 1% distance determination to the LMC, it has been possible to improve the constraint on the Hubble constant. So how it has been done? Then in fact, the group here has observed eclipsing binary, LED type star eclipsing binary in the Large Magellanic Cloud. So you measure the eclipsing binary, and you have a linear parameter of your star. And if you can have a good estimation of the diameter of the component, of the binary and the interferometric measurement give you a direct determination of the distance. Of course, these stars are in the LMC, they are very small, so it's not possible to do that. So it's important to use a statistical relation. That's the relation we call the surface brightness relation. And the fact that the colleagues here have used a very nice surface brightness color relation, very well adapted to LED type star. It has been possible thanks to the observation of more than 50 LED type star in the galaxy by the VLTI Pioneer instruments. So very accurate angular diameter determination, and then possibility to calibrate this relation on the galactic LED type star, and then to use this relation on distant star. And doing that, you could have a good determination. So a good determination of a good estimation of the diameter of your LED type star, of your distant star. And that's the way we want to use in the future for faint target of the future space mission that will observe exoplanet. That's a way also to use this surface brightness color relation for this estimation of angular diameter, but the impact for distance determination is also very high. So, as I told you, for the exoplanet domain, the connection between the exoplanet, the planet domain, and the stellar domain is very high. And we know that there is a large diversity of exoplanets. There is a large diversity of condition of habitability in the stars. So one of the main science driver of the Spica instrument is to improve the knowledge of the star, to improve the knowledge of the planets. So this program will be done in parallel to the ESA Plateau mission. So this mission that will be launched in 2025, 2026 is dedicated to the characterization of planet, and especially that they are using, in fact, information coming from different observational techniques, and especially the fact that we can bring to them radius of star thanks to the determination of the angular diameter is very important. So here is the current scheme of the plateau data flow, and the very important thing is the stellar parameter extraction here that will go in the database of the mission. And the most important aspect that will have to be used for the planet determination is the radius and the effective temperature of the star, because this is direct constraint for the habitability to constrain the habitability zone around the star. And this parameter can be obtained by different techniques, either spectroscopy and using the fit of spectral energy distribution, through photometry measurement and infrared flux method, or surface brightness relation. So using well-calibrated surface brightness relation and measuring photometry in different bands allow to make determination of radius and effective temperature. And interferometry can bring direct measurement of radius. Of course, if you know the parallax, but we know have a very large number of Gaia parallaxes, so that's measuring the angular diameter and using the Gaia parallaxes give you direct access to the interferometric radius without any model, in fact. Here, in the surface brightness relation, you have to deal with the extinction, for example. So you need a model to correct for the extinction and to correct your photometry. In the spectroscopy, you have a model for obtaining the spectral energy distribution. There is also a very interesting thing also is that in the relation between the angular diameter measured by interferometry and the effective temperature is a relation with the power 2, whereas in the spectral energy distribution that is classically used for determining effective temperature of star, the relation is a power 4. So we know already that the effective temperature that we can obtain through the measurement of angular diameter of star has a better precision than the one we can determine by the spectral energy distribution. So the idea, of course, is that for the moment we have to do this kind of fundamental stellar parameter determination through interferometry on a very small number of stars, or bright stars, and the idea is, of course, to push that to larger samples. For the distance, as I told you already, so this is the link of the Spica project with the Araucaria project for distance determination in the universe. The idea is that we can easily obtain a very accurate, and I will explain you later on what is going on with that, new surface brightness color relation, and the fact that we can use them for interacting, eclipsing binary, not only late type star that start to be well understood in terms of model, but also for early type star is very interesting because, for example, for the previous work I explained was made on the Large Magellanic Cloud, which is quite close to our galaxy. But doing the same, for example, on M31 or M33 is much. You can observe eclipsing binary in such a long distance galaxy, but it's fainter, and there is a preference to use early type star, which are much brighter, and there is a lot of eclipsing binary for early type star, and that's the surface brightness color relation for early type star is very badly known for the moment. So improving this relation for early type star is very important. So what is the situation of the angular diameter measurement? So there is a catalog. You can find it with the Vizier tool on the CDS in Strasbourg. It's a paper by Duvert in 2016. It's called the JMDC. It's the JMMC Measured Diameter Catalog. So in 2006, I think this number have been updated to 2018. There is typically 1,500 stellar angular diameter that have been measured, but this catalog contains everything. So it means it contains lunar occultation technique, intensity interferometry, optical interferometry, and in the optical interferometry domain, which is dominating this number, there is measurement in a very wide domain of wavelengths, from the visible to the thermal infrared. And it's very difficult to compare all this angular diameter measurement. And by the way, as I told you on Thursday, there is only just a little bit more than 10% of these stars that have an angular diameter with a precision better than 1%. And we know that to improve the quality of the stellar parameter determination, we need a precision of 1% on the angular diameter. In the past, with the poor quality of the parallaxes we had with Hipparcos, the determination of the radius of star was really limited by the quality of the parallax. But now, with the quality of the parallax with Gaia, if we do not go to the 1% or 2% precision on the angular diameter, that will be this measurement that will limit the precision on the radius. So this is the distribution of this angular diameter, and you see this limit typically to 0.1, 0.2 milliards seconds, and quite close star here. And the distribution in spectral type. And by the way, it can be seen that there is quite not so much early type star in this domain. So I was speaking before about spectral surface brightness color relation. So my colleague Nicolas Nardetto has made a recent review of this the existing surface brightness color relation, and so this is relation published in the literature. There is something like 23 different surface brightness color relation existing in the literature, and when you plot this relation here, which give you the flux as a function of the color. So you see that there is a lot of there is a domain around V minus K color index of 2 that are very consistent. In fact, all the relations are completely coherent and give a correct determination. If you measure the color index, you can measure the flux, and if you measure the flux, you can have a determination of the angular diameter of the star, which is the goal of this relation. The goal of this relation is measuring a photometry. You can obtain a determination of the angular diameter. Of course, which relation you want to use. If you go to late type star, you see that here this is badly defined. So there is many relations, but the relations are not coherent among themselves. And again, in the early type star here, where this is very interesting to go for eclipsing binary in distant galaxy, this is badly known, in fact. And for example, if you go to late type star, is here around that way, you see that the precision you cannot claim determination of the angular diameter with a precision better than 9%, and that's the same for early type star. So in fact, even if we have good surface brightness color relation existing in the literature, this is not enough for the determination of angular diameter of a very large number of stars, and we need to improve this situation, especially by looking at this region and this region. And that's one of the goals of the project. So this relation, as I told you, have been based on various types of stars. We have also the problem of the photometry that is sometimes not very well measured, especially in the K-band. And also, as we will see later, the previous relation I show you can be biased by effect like if you include fast rotator in your system. That's very difficult because I show you yesterday or the day before, I show some images obtained by interferometry of odd star in fast rotation, and measuring the surface brightness on a star where you know that you have a gradient of temperature is very hard, in fact, and the parameter that you will obtain at the end will highly depend on the inclination of the system. So that's a lot of problems that are behind this possibility of using this relation. So the goal of the CHARAL project, the SPICA project, is to measure the diameter of something like 1,000 stars. In fact, 800 stars with a precision of 1% or better, and complement this sample with the detailed characterization of something like 200 stars in order to have a good determination of the impact of rotation of spots on the statistical relation. So this is, of course, with the link with the space mission. And the fact that that's a very interesting situation today, because in the first generation of photometric mission dedicated to the planet, the CORO mission in Europe and the Kepler mission in the US, this mission that were dedicated to photometric transit of planets in front of their star, they were observing a star very faint, in fact. And at the end of this mission, the community finally understand that it was really difficult to continue the characterization, the ground characterization of stars because of the faint magnitude of the stars. So the new mission, the K2 mission or the TESS, KEOPS, that will be launched by the end of the year. The TESS is already in operation and plateau in 2025. They have focused their objective on bright star. So not bright star, but brighter star than the first mission, so that it will help for the ground characterization, and it's why this is very nice to have this possibility, because for the interferometer, going to star up to magnitude 10 will probably be possible with the improved situation of the adaptive optics on the interferometer, but going fainter will be quite hard. So this is the general way we want to work with this three main domain, the exoplanet host star with the determination of the parameter of the planet by combination of photometry, parallaxes and models. Either the other way of using the interferometric data that we want to get with the measurement of limb darkened angular diameter here is to improve also the atmospheric model, the model of the stellar atmosphere models, and again with the Gaia parallaxes here, going to improve the knowledge of the fundamental parameter of star and their link with the stellar activity, especially for the targets of the future mission that are known as asteroseismic targets. For the standard star, the goal is, of course, as I told you, to do this surface brightness color relation that are used after that for many science objectives. So what do we mean by a large number of stars? So typically, if we consider that we have 5 luminosity class and 7 spectral type, it means that we need really a few hundred of stars for having a good sample of the Hertzsprung Russell diagram, for improving the precision and the accuracy of the surface brightness relations in a different part of the domain. And also that we have already something like 200 exoplanet host stars that are accessible to CHARAL. And measuring angular diameter is complicated because you know that we have sometimes fast rotator, and the diameter is hard to define, of course. You may have also pulsation spots, multiplicity, disk. So it's why it's really important to have a very accurate determination of the sample of star that we will observe, but also to be ready to characterize the activity of star. So the three main science goals that we have should take into account the activity, and that's why in the sample we are building, we are also considering spending part of the time for the determination of the parameter of rotating star, measuring binarity. So in fact, we have defined our sample with a different group, either for just measurement of diameter, which is indicated as a D, or having, for example, for binary star, where we want to have determination of masses of star. Here, for example, we will need not only the diameter, but we need to make images of the binary to have the correct determination of the parameter of the binary system. Well, that's the kind of program we are preparing in for reaching our science goal. And we have seen also yesterday that there is a limit of in the Lim-Darkenegg measurement, typically of 0.8 milliards seconds. With the exercise we have done yesterday, we know that this is typically the limit of star that we can measure. For the VLTI, if we have made the same simulation as yesterday, we'll see that this is only a star larger than 4 milliards seconds for which we can measure the limb darkening. And the limb darkening is very critical because if you are only able to measure an equivalent uniform disk of a star, you need a model. You need a model of stellar atmosphere to go from the uniform disk to the limb darkened disk, and that's not very good because you can use different models and you will get different results. So directly measuring the limb darkening is very important, and now we know that we have to measure star with a diameter larger than 0.8 milliards seconds, and in fact that's quite interesting, but because it gives you typically on the Chara array with the Spica instruments, with the limiting magnitude and the game of star that the range of star that we can reach for the spectral type F, G, and K for dwarf star, you will see that there is many hundreds of stars that we can measure like this. So that will be a very important revolution because up to now, after 30 years of operation of optical interferometer, maybe we know probably less than 10 stars for which the limb darkening has been measured, in fact. So that will really change the game by having a large number of stars where we can characterize the limb darkening. It has a direct impact on the stellar atmosphere model. We will have the possibility of constraining the 1D or 3D model of stellar atmosphere to improve the situation, and that's really critical because if you look at the way people are considering using the data from the future space mission, they are completely based on models. So we can have a very direct impact on removing the dependence on model. So this is statistic about the number of stars that we can observe. This is so the plane curve for the different spectral types. It gives you the angular diameter of star as a function of the magnitude, and the dashed line here gives you the population of stars. And you see that with the limits we have defined for observing on the Chara sky with a magnitude maximum of typically 8, which gives almost the good signal-to-noise ratio that we can reach. You see that we have quite a large number of stars, and except as I told you before, that for the O-type star, there will be, you see that there will be, we will access to typically 10 stars, but they are very small in fact, and there is almost no possibility of measuring anything else than just the diameter of the O star. But for the other one, we have a quite large number of possibilities. So here is a kind of computation we have made for understanding the sensitivity of the instrument, and that's what we see here is that with the classical way of using the visible instrument as we did in the past with very short exposure, we are limited, in fact, in terms of sensitivity, especially for the high spectral resolution, where the limiting magnitude is not compatible with the ball, and that's why we need to go to longer exposure time, and going to longer exposure time is a main requirement of the instrument, and it's why we need also to go for fringe tracker for going to longer integration time. There is also a question: is for observing 1,000 of stars, and as I told you, there has been something like 1,000 of stars already measured by optical interferometry, but it took 30 years. So that's not possible to spend the next 30 years for measuring a new 1,000 of stars, of course. So we need to have a better strategy, and that's something we have tested on Chara with the current instrument that is installed, is in fact to do a very efficient observing program where your interferometer is looking in one direction in the sky. You observe your star for 10 minutes, and then you go back and you take the other star and you continue like this. So that gives you a very interesting possibilities to observe in a very small range of declination during the night, and the night after you can change the declination. You can of course observe in different periods of the year to cover the whole sky, and that's also very interesting, because your interferometer is always is very stable, in fact, because you are looking always in the same direction. So you can reduce the problem of misalignment, and for the Chara array, this is where we will install. This is the focal lab. I show you before the movie with the delay line and the instrument, and the new instrument will be installed here. It's quite simple, in fact. This is the beam combination part here with the 6 fibers coming from the injection system, and we in fact go directly to the spectrograph here for the dispersed fringes system. We need to have a very good accuracy in the interferometric data measurement, and in fact we take 20% of the line with a beam splitter to measure the photometry of each beam. So it's something that I explained you the first day. In the interferometric equation, you have a term that is photometric, to compensate the photometric imbalance in the beam. So if you have two telescopes with a difference of flux, your contrast is not one. So you need to measure all the time what is the flux in your telescope. So that's why we have this photometric beam. This is classical now in the instrument. And so here we have the 6 fibers that generate the light for the spectrograph, and the fibers are coming from the entrance part of the instrument, where we have the Chara beam that are injected in the fiber, thanks to the off-axis parabola mirror here. And the main new things that we are adding in this system is to control the quality of the injection of the light in the fiber by a control loop, where we take a part of the light, in fact the light that is below the part of the light we will use in the spectrum in 4 pixels that are going on the detector. So this is an image here on the detector, and this is the chip that is now ready, and it will be installed in January next year on an existing infrared instrument that is on the Chara array. We will just install the fiber of the system here and put it in front of the detector. So that's the program we have started with the group in Nice. So the first step will be to install and test this fringe tracker in January next year, and probably by optimize the operation of the instrument by during next year. And the visible instrument that I presented will be ready by the end of 2021. We have almost all the funding for that, and we are. The plan is to start the 3 years survey of the thousands of stars by 2022, in order to be ready when the Plateau mission will be launched. Okay, so now I'm coming back to the future. So that's it for this part, and I will now give you some information about this project called Planet Formation Imager. So there is a website, and you can look on planetformationimager.eu. So that's a project that is supported by different groups in Europe and in the US, also in Australia. There is no funding for that for the moment. This is just preliminary study, and the main goal of this project is to look at the different region of the circumstellar accretion disk around for planet forming region. So the idea is to have this large circumstellar accretion disk, which is quite very large. In fact, it's typically dimension of 80 astronomical units. What is really important, in fact, and has been almost not yet really understood, is the gap in the disk here. And most importantly, and that's the main goal of the mission, is to understand here there is a planet and there is a residual circumplanet accretion disk that is very, very small and that is only accessible thanks to a very long baseline interferometry. So that's describing the main science driver of this planet formation imager. There is a little bit of characteristic in terms of absolute magnitude for the different regions that are interesting for this kind of Tetori star and the different model of Jupiter-like planet that we can imagine in this disk. This is absolute magnitude, and if you want to compare that for objects that are located at a distance of the torus region, which is 140 parsec, then you need to add something like 5.7 magnitude to this number to have the apparent magnitude. And you see that the planet that we want to observe around in this disk are something like magnitude 20, 22, which is the need for sensitivity. So that's the top science, the top level science requirement with different spectral resolution and the sensitivity. And the baseline for this future array of telescope is to have a 12 telescope of 3 meters on a baseline of 1.2 kilometers, and especially dedicated to the mid-infrared for the science goal. There is, of course, a lot of technological difficulty, but there is steps. There are many in the 10 coming years. There are many of these difficulties that can be understood thanks to work on the VLTI or on the CHAR array, and that's part of one of the main mission that the community is pushing for planet forming region. In the past, this science goal was developed in the framework of space mission, like the terrestrial planet finder or the Darwin mission on the ESA side. But these space missions are no longer considered by the space agency. And that's because also it seems to be possible from the ground now, thanks to this the improved situation of ground interferometry. So for the longer term, if we want to go one day with optical very large array, this is the VLA and the ALMA. If we want to go in that direction of having a very large number of antenna or telescope for making images of stars with very good imaging capabilities, there is probably it's probably necessary to change our view. Why? Because when you look at I show you during this lecture, I show you some picture of the VLTI lab, of the Chara lab, and you have seen that that's very crowded. There is a lot of things. There is a lot of optics. You have 20 optics to go from the telescope to the instrument. You have this very complicated delay line with very accurate motion, and doing that for 6, 8, 10 is maybe possible, but it's very costly. Doing that for 60 telescopes would be almost impossible to accommodate. So accommodating 60 delay line of 500 meters will be really a nightmare and will be really a high cost. So that's probably a limitation. So there are other possibilities to avoid having delay line thanks to the potential possibility of intensity interferometry. So you just record the fluctuation of intensity on each antenna and you make your correlation in the computer. I explained you that this is not very sensitive, but there are progress thanks to multiplexing of band. So that's some group in the world are working to that option. Of course, going to space is much better because you take your interferometer and you move it looking at the star. You don't need delay line. Everything is ready. You can, just by the shape of your array, you can compensate the delay. This is not possible on the ground, of course, but in space that would be possible, and you can avoid delay line in space. But going to space is very, very expensive. In fact, we have started to think to another possibility, which is what we call the direct imaging interferometer, which is like an optical Arecibo. Coming back to some theoretical consideration, that's very important to have in mind that having n aperture gives you n images by n by n pixel. So it's really critical if we want to have detail on the surface of star or imaging exoplanet. It's really critical to increase the number of aperture. The second thing is that there is also the way you combine the beam is critical. If you look to the initial FISO, the initial idea of FISO, of just considering a giant telescope, or giant lens here, or giant refractor here, with a mask, you got your information. But this is not very efficient because you have a lot of parasite interferometric peak here. It's why Antoine Labeyrie has proposed a different version, which is a generalization of the Michelson stellar interferometer. In fact, is what we call the densified pupil. So you zoom, in fact, each beam before the combination, so that, as seen by the detector, you see a very densified pupil instead of looking at the very diluted pupil. And that's highly improved the quality of the image combined here. To convince you, there is a simulation here with a theoretical array of 61 telescopes, with each telescope is a diameter D and a separation S, and the direct image that is given by the FISO combination scheme give you a very high angular resolution images at the center, but you have a lot of artifacts, and these artifacts are also spectrally dispersed here. So the quality of the image is not very good because of this artifact coming from the interferometric pattern of this device. So if you densify, so if you increase the size of each subpupil so that you got this kind of things with a diameter D at the end for each of the sub-aperture, what you look is it's equivalent to a giant mirror. So you get very nice images here. So that's, of course, much better to combine an interferometer with that scheme instead of that scheme. there is a cost. Of course. You reduce the field of view. In fact, the field of view that you have is limited to the wavelength divided by the separation between telescopes. In fact, but this is not really a problem, because if you look at this image in the FISO scheme, there is also a limitation if you have in terms of field, because you cannot go far away, otherwise your image is not well contrasted. In both cases, you reach the resolution lambda over b, with b the baseline, the maximum baseline, but you have increased the quality of the image, and all the light that was dispersed in that system is concentrated here. So that's much better. So how to do that? So the idea is to think to what has been done on the Arecibo radio telescope, or what is currently done in China with this fast, what is called the fast radio telescope. This is a fixed primary mirror of 500 meters with supporting, in fact, a moving gondola. Here, on the Arecibo telescope, the primary mirror is fixed, and the gondola is moving. So when the primary mirror is fixed, in fact, the image of the star moving in the sky is moving on the focal sphere. And if you move your detector when the star is moving in the sky, you can record the image of the star. So that's the way Arecibo has worked. It was worked fine. On the fast radio, the main problem of the Arecibo radio telescope is the fact that the shape of the primary mirror is spherical mirror. So you have a lot of spherical aberration, and you need a big system for correcting the spherical aberration. For the fast radio telescope, this is a 500-meter telescope, but it's an active surface, in fact. There is, below the surface, there is cable that are movable, so that you can adapt the shape of the fixed. At the beginning, it's fixed and spherical, but you can change the shape of the mirror to make a parabolic mirror tracking the star. So this is like you deform this mirror to have a parabolic shape, off-axis parabolic shape, looking at the star. When the star is moving, you change the shape of the parabol. And that's under progress on the China seat. This is not fully operational at that time, but this is a very nice idea. And we have tried, in fact, to consider doing the same things in the optical domain. So this is a project where we have a valley that is quite spherical, with a lot of small mirror on the ground, and a gondola. You have the curvature center of each of the small mirror, and this is the focal sphere. So any image of a star will move here on this sphere. And if you put your camera here and you move your camera by small cable, then you can have a very high angular resolution images. So that's what we are doing. So that's the picture of the seat, and you maybe don't see anything here, except in fact there are two details on the image here. If you look at the bottom here, there is a small tent here, which is the control room of the optical Arecibo telescope. And if you look in the sky, very close to here, there is a small dot here. And if I zoom that, this is the image of the gondola here. So what we are doing here is, so we are doing an array of small mirror that is primarily a spherical mirror here, and we have attached an optical system on a big cable here crossing the valley. So this is something like 800 meters here, and we are looking here to see if we can see the light of the star coming from the star, going on the M1 and coming in the gondola. So this is the view of the gondola again, and I will zoom on this one. So this is the electronics of the gondola. The orange cable is the supporting cable crossing the valley. The gondola is attached to that cable, and the gondola is attached to the ground by 3 main cables, one going to the west, one going to the east, and one going to the south. So changing the length of this 3 cable that is attached to the entrance point of the gondola allow you to put your gondola where you want in the sky, because you have the possibility of controlling 3 translation. And we have also 3 other cables, one going to the east and 2 other cables going to the south, so that we can orient the gondola in any of the direction by moving this cable. So with the 6 cable, we have 3 rotation, 3 translation, and we can do what we want with the optical bench that is here. There is a nice feature. See, we have an electronic system here, and we have a battery lift, because we need some power in the electronic here, and there is a battery lift. We can go up and go down for battery for putting the seat. So here is the driving system with the 3 winches on the south, the 2 winches attached with 2 motors on the east, and 1 winch on the west. This is our control room. It's very nice. You have a very nice view of the mountain. It's very convenient. Okay, it's quite crowded in terms of electronics and cable and computer, but that's the system. And here is the central array, where we have, in fact, the support of the. For the moment, we are working with only 2 mirrors. This is the M1 north and the M1 south. It's just behind these 3. It's 16 meters between these 2 mirrors. This is an intermediate guiding telescope for looking at an accurate alignment between the 2 mirrors here. And here we have a Wi-Fi antenna for the communication with the gondola. So the support of the mirror is here. The light coming from the star is supposed to go on the mirror and then to go on the gondola. And when the star is moving, the gondola is here. The star is moving, the gondola is moving, and we should have the star always on the gondola. So there is a driving control system for the alignment here. I will explain you later. And the mirror here is fixed on the ground, but is supported in fact by a motorized support in order to change the position of the mirror in order to mimic the parabolic change, because we need to have a parabolic mirror and not a spherical mirror. So moving this mirror by small tilt of a few minutes of arc in one and in the 2 directions is sufficient, in fact, to transform the spherical mirror in a parabolic mirror. So that's the reason of this system. And of course, the difficulty was to find the correct position of the mirror so that the light coming from the stars goes in the gondola, which was not completely obvious. But we have invented a new system where the light from the star comes to the mirror and goes to the gondola. And the light coming from the star goes also in this optical scheme where we have a detector. And the light coming from the gondola goes to the star, of course. So the light coming from the gondola goes to the star, but we can, thanks to a modified corner cube here, take part of the light coming from the gondola to go to do as if the star coming from the gondola was coming from the star here. And we look at the difference here, and we can superimpose the 2 systems here. What we have in the gondola is an optical scheme where mainly we have a detector for the image of the image and pupil plane for controlling all the alignment, and a camera here where we have the dispersed fringes. So we have been very successful last summer because we have been able to get an image of the star in the gondola. So I will show you one small movie. So what you will see here is a movie of the camera that is installed on the gondola. the star is crossing the sky. This is a Vega star. It's a very bright star, and for the North Hemisphere. And the gondola is moving. Here we have the image of the star, and here we have an image of the pupil. So it's the image of the primary mirror with the light of the star. And that's the movie where we have seen the star during some minutes here. There is a white light coming from time to time. This is a laser that is switched on from time to time. And you see here there is some motion of the star. This is when we have changed the position of the primary mirror just to center correctly the star in the center of the field. And so we were not successful enough to get the light from the two telescopes, the two mirrors on the ground, but we have been able to look from the gondola to the light coming from the two mirrors. So that's the light coming from the north mirror and the light coming from the south mirror, but this is not the starlight. This is a light that was installed close to the mirror here. And again, it was possible to look at that during the motion of the gondola, which gives you an impression of the quality. In fact, the gondola is moving, so the two images are moving, but the two images are quite fixed with respect to one to the other. And that's important, because if we have the two stars will be superimposed by just changing a little bit one of the two mirrors, and after that the two stars will move at the same time. And that's enough to stay in the detector, which was the first goal of the project. Okay, I will stop this. So, as you may understand, this is not really operational, of course, but this is the first step, and that's a way of thinking for the future. So the idea would be also maybe in the future to have a very high density array of telescopes that could be coupled with the ELT. So there are simulations here that we have made with Antoine Limbery. This is a zoom image of the ELT alone, and coupling the ELT with an array of small telescopes with the same collecting area as the ELT will give you a very nice image with a much better high angular resolution. So there are some possibilities to do that. There is a nice valley in the north of the Cerro Armazones in Chile. Of course, will be very difficult to install a cable, but maybe we can bring to have drones supporting the gondola. And we can dream again. This is a simulation of the project what was called by Antoine Limbery ExoEarth Imager. So this is a numerical simulation of the direct image of an exoearth located at 10 parsec and with 30 by 30 pixels, in fact, on the image. So it's a 150 mirror of 3 meters with a 150 kilometer baseline, 30-minute exposure. It could be in space or on the moon. And with a 30-minute exposure, we can clearly identify the change with a multispectral analysis of such images. We can look at that. So look at the angular resolution. This is the field is 0.1 milliarc second. So you see the resolution is much better from that. So it's why we need this very large array.
So getting 100 2-meter telescopes is significantly more work than getting 100 1-meter telescopes.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
many 1 meter, right?
Sure. And in fact, after this first simulation, well, at the beginning we considered that 3 meter is quite easy to install in a rocket. But in fact, after doing more simulation, we have understood that it's much better to have a larger number of mirrors with a smaller diameter. In fact, so having 1,000 mirrors of 1 meter would be better. We can do it. At least this goal is very important. And so there is also, I didn't have any slide from that, but Antoine Limbery is looking also the possibility of laser trapped mirror. So there is very small mirror of a few centimeters that could be trapped on a spherical shape by beating waves. Using a very high power laser, you can create beating wave in the space with hundreds of kilometers and with spherical shape, and you can block the very small mirror on this beating wave. So that's the kind of future project that maybe in 50, 100 years, maybe we'll see the light. That's it.